Hi everyone, my name is Peter Söderholm. I'm the Director for Sales Engineering in the Nordics. And with me here today I have Rick. Rick, why don't you introduce yourself?
Well, thank you, Peter. Yeah, my name is Rick Gutenberg. I'm a senior sales engineer in the Netherlands.
So the title was why VPN is a lot like Spice Girls. So it's a bit of a joke, but it's actually a little bit of a serious as well. So I don't know, Rick, why don't we get that analogy out of the way to start with? So why VPN is a lot like Spice Girls is essentially the fact that it's actually a number, by the way, 96, or in fact 1996, I would say is more precise. And the fact that both Spice Girls came out with their first album, and at the same time, that's really where VPN was essentially created. And what we'd like to do with this session and to talk about this concept around VPN is not just to say that it's kind of old and we think that the music from Spice Girls maybe have aged better way than the VPN. But fundamentally, we felt it was a needed session and hopefully an interesting session because especially last year, but for many years, we've had conversations with customers around enabling remote working. And in enabling remote working, should we go with VPN solutions, or we should look at something else, or even using Citrix with VPN? And we think that comparing those two is a little bit like comparing apple to oranges, because one is essentially a technology, and the other one is more a strategy and a mindset in terms of how IT and information should meet the users. And for the most part, getting to the user securely, but also with a great user experience. An interesting thing is that through many years, people have used Citrix as a remote working solution. It's often been kind of the plan B or an additional way of working versus the normal way of working. Normal way of working would be sitting in an office with a laptop and inside of the LAN and everything is working well. And as we have these conversations, sometimes we get drilled down into all the technical features and acronyms. And we wanted to, in this session, stay on a bit of a higher level and look more fundamentally what VPN causes for security and for user experience, and why we believe, or certainly I believe, and Rick believes, that it's really a bad idea and it's not meeting the requirements. Even when it came in '96, I think it was some challenges. And even if we look at today's world and not looking at IT specifically, people have had other requirements to get information out to users, especially during this year, where people are no longer sitting in an office. Obviously, they're mostly working from home. And this is now becoming the main way of working, not just the alternative way of working. Barclay was out saying moving, thousands of people into the same building might just be a thing of the past, or Twitter was saying we might have employees that never going to get actually to the office. And this is certainly something that we have seen in the past, but it definitely have accelerated with the pandemic last year. And now as people are kind of scrambling also to say, what will be our strategy going forward? How should we build a sustainable IT environment and workplace environment to meet the future requirements of the business?
Yeah, but on the other hand, we also have got take Google or Citrix or even VMware as example. Everyone is working more from home during the pandemic, and after the pandemic is over, there will be a change from going to the office 5 times a week to let's say 2 or 3 days going to the office, and the other way is just working from home or working any place where you want to work instead of at the office.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and this is also why I believe that that conversation between using VPN or not and what technology we need to use is really a different conversation versus looking more holistically to what the objective of IT is. Because in my view, if we have to look at a bit of a broader perspective than just VPN or not. And to start with, just the fact of the VPN concept in itself, if you go back to that 90s edition, I was actually part of launching the first VPN solution of Citrix back in early 2000, which called Extranet. It was not a bad VPN solution, but it had the same issues like other VPN solution has. And that is that normally you sit inside the office, you have your application data inside the office, and that's how application delivery was designed. You get your Windows XP, Windows 7 or Windows 10 laptop, and you worked in the office. Now, occasionally there were some people that needed remote access, and the way to solve this problem was to create that virtual private network. And essentially, that was enabling internet access from outside into the office, and you created this kind of security parameter, the firewall, the IDS, and all the capabilities. And then you created a secure connection from the user that was sitting at home over the public network and into the office. And it seems like an elegant solution, but it's essentially, in my view, a network workaround to an application delivery problem. And that's why I think it still, or even then, wasn't the best way. Because now this device is part of that security perimeter. And that's also why people had to do a lot of additional security capability on those devices. That's why we have personal firewall, we have antivirus, we have hard disk encryption. And with that comes management, because then we needed to manage these additional components and make sure they're all working together. Often they're coming from 2 or even 3, 4 different vendors. And how do we update them and make sure they work together so that we can securely connect into the office? And as soon as you get, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, Rick.
Yeah, sorry. But on the other hand, if you look at the user experience, then you only can connect to your certain applications or the applications that are necessary for you as a worker only with the company device. So you can't use any unmanaged devices. So let's say the device from your girlfriend, because yours is broken and you can't go to the office for somehow or some reason. Then at least you have to install VPN software and then try to log in and then install even all the applications. That's not how we see it is nowadays, or it should be nowadays.
Yeah, and not even that, but just also consultant people, external partners, manufacturing, and so forth. Manufacturers are just external people that are not part of the organization have to have that managed device, and you have to actually deliver that device, secure that device, and especially for external people that maybe work only as a limited of a time. This has been a constant debacle for a lot of organizations, even before the pandemic. So this kind of extending of security perimeter is definitely one of the biggest challenges, and I think we discussed that earlier as well, Rick. That a lot of the more modern attacks, if say from penetration's point of view, it's not on the actual main site. It's actually on those external devices, and try to get malware or try to get software onto those much more exposed devices on the outside, and then once the connection of VPN is established, that malware have access to the full network sometimes, and that's also another difficult task to mitigate from a security point of view.
Agree with that.
Yeah. All right. So, and the funny thing is that while that was back in the days, today it's even less relevant, because as we've seen, data and applications are also moving outside of your network, outside of your data center. In many cases, there's a whole bunch of, I used to say everyone have that Excel spreadsheet with what type of applications you have in your environment. And there are Windows applications, old web applications, internal web applications, SaaS applications, and so forth. So many of those applications are already out on the internet, and how do you then protect them and at the same time provide a simple and a singular way of accessing applications that are both on the inside and on the outside? And how do you simply get access to just documents and share and collaborate on those documents the same way? So this is really the way we see that this is even worse, and you have to have another way of thinking. You can't really solve the problem on the same level as you created this, as a smart person said some time ago.
Yeah, and what I wanted to add on as well is that if you look at the user experience again, is that nowadays everyone is using multiple devices. So when I'm not in the house, I'm using my cell phone to verify or read an email or starting a certain application. And if you use a VPN connection, you also need to have the VPN client connected on that device as well. And especially when it's your personal device, you don't want any VPN software installed to make that connection, because it's personal.
Yeah. No, it's true. It's as an architect some time ago working for a big global company. They have over 100,000 people in the organization. he simply put it, how do we deal with external people internally, and how do we deal with internal people externally? And clearly the VPN was not the solution. They desperately tried to get out of the VPN solution because that concept didn't work for that very simple use cases. So this is definitely why I think that on a broader level, VPN is not the way to go. Right, that's kind of the conclusion. Let me show you. I don't know if you want to comment on this, Rick, but this kind of balance, I guess, between experience and security is really the problem here.
Yeah, exactly. Because if you look at the user experience, you want to connect from a certain device, and it doesn't matter which device you want to connect on because you only want to do your work. And so the experience is really important. And on the other hand, we got the security on the right side. That's, let's say, everything we do needs to be secured in a certain matter of way because nowadays every attack is very hard to get to achieve that, or at least put that away. So it's really necessary to make a certain way between the experience or the security. So the yin yang, like I always call it, it's really important nowadays with a modern workspace.
Yeah. So that kind of sets the scene a little bit for kind of agreeing that VPN isn't necessarily the way forward. So what is the solution then? What is the concept that at least we're thinking of? And I think one of the main, and it's nothing new, it's been around for a while, but I'm still seeing this being discussed, and the fundamental shift going away from what I call device-based IT delivery to people-based delivery. And what I mean with that is that traditionally we used to have, let's say, a locked-on Dell gray laptop, like single device, specific device, and IT was delivered to that device. And then if the user needed to work, he needed to have that type of device. It needed to be managed. And then if you needed to be mobile, you needed to carry it around with you and connect it. So it was kind of like single device, location specific. It was mostly had to be owned by the business, which make this joint venture, partner, franchising scenarios, merger acquisition, very, very complicated and time consuming. And it was a great deal of both manual and reactive touch on those devices. And people, many cases, like to get out of this. They like to say, hey, can we have one common solution for all these people? And the way to do this, in my opinion, or our opinion, is to move to what is called a people-based approach. So going from like a workplace with a device-based approach to a modern workspace with a people-based approach, where actually IT comes to me as a person, and applications is delivered to me as a person, and so is the data. And then I can choose how, when, and where to work. And it should be the same and similar user experience, regardless of what sort of device I have, from where I'm working. And it should also be able to cater for that user business owned or co-owned, so that people can deliver IT also to devices that are not managed and controlled by the business. It might not be all applications, and it might not be the same way, but it should be a consistent and branded user experience for the user. And of course, we need to have some level of automation, proactiveness, and self-service, so that when we authenticate and we start our work, we should have some intelligence that are presenting it based on my role, my focus. Maybe I should be highlighted or flagged about some specific tasks that are waiting for me, so that the IT business and the solution can support prioritizing urgent things that I need to do. So that's kind of that's the broader kind of conversation. This is of course a bigger topic to deal with than just adding VPN or not, and that's also why I'm thinking, we have to make more investment into this, but it also is a requirement and significantly better payout than staying with a VPN or a device based. So this is kind of an example. It looks kind of similar to say that one is the traditional workplace is around a lone computer, and the modern workspace is what is called grab and go loaners. But behind the scene here is that on the left side there's a traditional tech company who is having consultants people. So this is a reception at a consultant building in one of the company's offices. There are hundreds of consultant people in this building, and it's so often that people show up there and they have to have a managed control device they cannot use their own, and these guys are charging by the hour, right? And it's so often that they don't have the assigned computer that they have tried to get some loan PCs at least to get a browser or whatever, and it's so often that it's not working, so they put up a sign that actually the sign is broken because it's been used so much. And if you look at the cost and the unproductiveness about this, or the lack of productivity in this, is huge. The other way is actually coming from Google. So this is something you can find on externally as well. It's called the grab and go loaners. It's essentially a concept where any reception of Google, you can pick up a Chromebook, you can put on your YubiKey or it's a USB authentication, and you authenticate, and that device is yours for the day. And when you're done, you just slip it back, and you don't have to carry it with you. And I know it's been such a popular thing that in one of the offices in London, they had to kind of decline local people to use it because they want to do this on Fridays because they don't have to carry around the laptop when they leave the office. So obviously it's easier for Google because they have maybe a more modern application infrastructure. Many of the customers have old legacy or at least a more complex environment that they need to deal with. But this is definitely where Citrix can help out and excel when it comes to dealing with all those application challenges and still get them to me as a person, not a device.
Well, yeah, yeah. One thing I want to add on a modern workspace is that you need to go to in line with a more zero trust concept, because at this moment don't trust any people or devices by default. So every user, every person or every device needs to be trusted on based on conditional access to the specific that's required for the job or the task that's in there for the user. So that can be based on the authentication part or even the location where it's connecting from or even the state from the certain device. And that should be a continuous monitoring of the user behavior. So instead of just only asking for a username and password and then open up the network, the complete network to start a certain application. So that's really important nowadays that's more in common.
Yeah, no, it makes a good sense, and it kind of ties into that kind of, as you say, the zero trust or the continuous checking. So that's also why we're getting it later on, but that's also why the security needs to be built into the application delivery, not an aftermath as a network workaround. That's why you get into all this complexity of how do you integrate a network solution with an application delivery solution. And that's also why that zero trust concept I think is very interesting for customers. But I also believe that you have to make this transition to be really successful with the zero trust concept. So here's another example of a company that have a lot of security requirements. It's a company called Saab. Saab Defense is it's a defense supplier, and they do fighter jets. They sold them to Switzerland, to Brazil, and recently to US for all their training planes for the Air Force. So obviously they deal with highly classified information. They do joint ventures. So every time they make this sell, they essentially set up a separate business together with a business partner. In this case, it was Boeing. And the obvious challenge about trust is an issue here because they don't trust the network, they don't trust the people, they don't trust the devices. And at the same time, they have a need to develop or deliver engineering resources. They have over 12,000 engineers worldwide that need fast, reliable, secure access to information. And this is what they created, this kind of digital workspace, they call it. And what they can do with this kind of solution being people-based focused, they don't talk about just high security. They talk about enough security for what the security is required to still maintain agility. And essentially they're able to, they work with DXC on this specific engagement, and been a great supporter of this. They can deliver a digital workplace within 2 days after a contract signing or commercial signing with a new vendor. And essentially that's how fast they need to be stay maintain competitive in this business. So that balance and the need is remarkable. And for sure, they're not making SSL VPN connections all over the world. That would be obviously absolutely devastating for the security perimeter and be able to balance that security with agility. Right. So I thought it was a great user experience with somebody who is working in a very, very difficult and high security environment on a global scale, and still able to meet those numbers actually.
Well, yeah. On the other hand, we talk about Saab in this moment, so that's a desktop virtualization platform. But especially smaller companies who don't have ever invest in a desktop virtualization platform, it's also hard to make the switch to a desktop virtualization platform. So there are always kind of exceptions or organizations that still uses the full PC with for high graphic users because at the engineering part, because they are only working in the office before the pandemic. So moving all the applications and data to a centralized data center solution is really hard to do, and it requires a lot of work. And with Citrix, we call it remote PC. You still have the possibility to connect to that full desktop that's in the office, but you can do it from working from outside of the office, so working from home without requiring a certain VPN connection. So it looks like a full user experience when the user is in the office, but actually is working from another location, not in the office.
No, it's a great example, Rick, and you're right, because we talk about all these big companies, they can invest a lot in this infrastructure, but I think this is again a great and very elegant example, an elegant solution. As you say, you basically leave the laptop or the desktop PC where it is, and you don't change anything in your application infrastructure, but you're reverting not to a VPN solution, but using our technology to remote display that desktop onto any device. And I know you've been involved in a number of these cases. I also know Citrix in other parts of the world had some really fantastic solutions when it comes to so quickly spin this up for customers that have had all these challenges with the pandemic and so forth. And we're not Citrix customers and had this solution from the past, but really spin up really, really fast. And as you say, even high graphic applications can deal with in this situation. So those tend to be one of the more difficult ones to actually handle, right? So we talk about GPU optimized and that stuff, right? Cool.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
All right.
So if you look at the, like we mentioned already, is that in a previous role or with a previous connection with a traditional workplace, you always had the yin yang between the experience or security. With a modern workspace, there is no or, it's a plus sign. So you get the user experience that's necessary, but also the required security when that's necessary as well. So let's say, for example, when you're connected to your company device, you can connect straight to your applications. But when you're connecting through a device that's unmanaged or from a girlfriend or from your neighbor, for example, you can still access that application, but we will do some security, add some security to it, that you can't copy and paste, for example, data out of that session, of outside that application. So then it's more secure, and all the users will get the best experience that fits the needs.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and I think this is, we kind of discussed this before, me and Rick, to say what can we leave you guys with some, and I don't want to go into that technical. Often we have too much technology conversation about this. I think we established our way of thinking, and hopefully you agree with me. But the way to kind of leave you with something you can challenge, or people can challenge and discuss around this, is this fundamental shift from moving to people-based instead of device-based IT approach, because that in itself unblocks a lot of those requirements we believe that used to be within locking things into a certain device. Everything from security to the complexity about managing all the software and having to understand where the data actually resides and so forth. And the second point, and we haven't gone into too much technical detail on this, but obviously we need to build in the security into the actual application data delivery, not as an aftermath. That's also so oftenly reviewed where there's a support for a flexible work style, but because of the security policies and security solutions in place, people are either forced to the office or forced to certain devices, and that is obviously against the user productivity and flexibility in many ways. And the other one, it's an obvious one. It's been with Citrix for a long time, but that possibility or the opportunity to create a single unified workspace, so that regardless if you're an internal or external person, and whether you exist internally or externally, the concept that global telco company had a challenge with, there should be a single customizable, a branded user experience where, based on your authentication, there will be a continuous monitoring where, when, and how, and what you're going to do. But it should feel and work the same regardless. That's essentially the three ones. And then these kind of concepts, we believe that this is important not only for security and not only for the user experience in general, but overall just to support that modern work style. Because pandemic or not, what we've seen is that people, work is not a place anymore. For sure, it's what people do, and people like to do that when, where, and how they want. So to be a sustainable, a modern, and an interactive employer, in many cases, this is a full requirement to even stay in business and be thriving and getting users who are being delighted with the IT environment.
So what you're basically saying is that if you, as a company, work on the 4 dots that's described in here, you will end up as a lucky person as in the right of the screen.
Yeah, yeah. That is how pleasant it is to be in that side of the world. So yeah, no, it's true. Rest assured that will be the look on people's faces. All right. Okay. So with that, I'd like to wrap this up. Thank you very much for tuning in, and hope you find this interesting and that you can have interesting conversations about moving IT to a flexible work style and a people-based focused IT delivery. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.